Second Kiddushin Daf Mem Tes finishes off the Gemara's discussion about when someone gives instructions to do something in an easy way, is he allowing him to do it in an easy way, but he's also happy if he will do it in a more difficult way, or does he want it specifically that way? Then the Gemara will go into additional situations based on our previous sugya where you stipulated one thing and got something else. It'll take us into some Agadata as to how you divine a Talmud Chacham. And then we'll get into more Agadata, the famous Gemara about the 10 kavin, the 10 measures of various different traits and where they ended up in the world, and we'll end off with a Mishnah. So let's begin. The Gemara says that Abaye says there are 3 Tanaim that hold that if you make a shliach to do something for you and you tell him to do it in an easy way, and he goes ahead and he does it in the harder way, so the 3 Tanaim that hold that that's okay, even though you said to do it the easy way. You were just allowing him to do it the easy way, but you're also happy if he were to do it in the hard way. One is Reb Shimon, who we've seen already, talking about a case where a woman made someone a shliach to be makabel Kiddushin for her, and she specified the silver dinarim as opposed to the gold dinarim. She's also happy if he takes the gold dinar. Now the next one is a bit of a lengthy discussion. That's Reb Shimon ben Gamliel's opinion. And he's talking about a get pashit as opposed to a get makosher. Now, the way you write the get has one of 2 ways. A simple, plain, unfolded get where everything's written on one side of the paper is called a get pashit. That's what was generally used. There's another version called a get makosher where it's folded each line and sewn down, and the signatures are on the back of the paper. And that is designed to be used for kahanim, so that it would be a slow, painstaking process to create the get. And that way, it would take them longer, and they would have more time to think about it, since if they divorce their wives, they cannot undo it afterwards, being a kohanim. So, the situation that's discussed in this Mishnah, we have 3 opinions discussing what happens if you take a get pashut, where it's supposed to be signed on the front, and you sign it on the back, or you take a get makosher, it's supposed to be signed on the back, and you sign it on the front. And that's a machlokes between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel. The Tanna Kama says either way that's done wrong is possible. And Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel says that if it's a get makosher and you sign it on the front, that's fine. And just make it into a get pashut. Don't sew it up. Don't fold it down. And make it into a get pashut, and the signatures will be on the front. Now, this machlokes is based on, it's not relevant to our sugya, but it's based on whether the zman, the date as it's written on the get, is different in a get pashut than in a get makosher, and therefore can you turn an intended get makosher into a get pashut or not. Now, the third opinion is not arguing on these 2. And the third opinion is Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, and he says a cryptic statement. He says, everything follows the custom of the place. The Gemara explains that Rav Shimon ben Gamliel against the first 2 opinions is another machlekes about if somebody gives instructions to a shliach to write a get makosher and he writes a pashut, or a pashut and he writes a makosher, is it good if he does it wrong? And the first 2, so they all agree that in a place where there's a specific minig, you have to follow the minig. And if you do it against what the minig of the place is, it's no good. The question is a place that has either minig. Some people write get pashut, some people write get makosher, and the Baal, the husband, gave orders to do one and he did the other. Specifically, if he gave orders to do the easier one, to do the get pashut, and he went ahead and he did the get makosher, is that kosher or not? And there the Tanna Kama and the second opinion, Chanina ben Gamliel, they both hold no. He wanted it to be done as a get pashut only, not as a get makosher, and therefore it's no good. And on that, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, it's okay, kol kamin gamadina, since it's acceptable either way. He's fine with it. All he was doing was saying you can do it the easier way, you don't have to do it the easier way. And this, therefore, is the second opinion that we've seen that holds that when you say to do something easier, you're allowing it, you're not insisting on it. Now, the third opinion that holds this way is Rabbi Elazar, and that's in the sugya of a woman who makes a shliach lekabal to go be makabel a get for her, and she says go be makabel in a certain place. And there you have a machlokes whether he's allowed to be makabel somewhere else or not. If he's makabel somewhere else, the Tanna Kama says it's possible because she did not want that place. And Rabbi Elazar says no, she was just telling him where. She was just trying to make it easier for him by telling him where to find it. If he ends up finding it somewhere else, she doesn't have a problem with that. Okay, now the Gemara moves on to return to analyzing Rav Shimon's opinion. We've seen in our last Mishnah, we had a list of things where the husband promised her something and it ended up being different than what she expected in a monetary sense. It was either worth more or less. And the Tanna Kama said either way, if it's not what she expected, it's possible. And Rav Shimon said if it's less than she expected, it's possible. If it's more, she's happy to take more, and therefore that's fine. Says the Gemara, she's only happy with more in monetary things. But as far as Yuchsin, let's say someone who's higher ranking in class, or let's say she thought he was a mamzer, and it turns out that he's only in a sin, which is not as puzzle as a mamzer is, she doesn't want anything higher than what she expected. And that's because she would say, the Gemara uses an expression, I don't need shoes that are too big for my feet. Which means to say she wanted someone on a certain class level. If she has someone who's on a higher class than her or higher than she needs, he's going to end up being haughty to her. She doesn't want that. Too high is a problem in Yuchsin also. In Yuchsin, at least, too high is a problem. Now, the Gemara says, let's prove this from our next Mishnah. Our next Mishnah, after the previous Mishnah, after the last Mishnah discusses if she received more or less than she expected in monetary value, the next Mishnah talks about if she thought he was a Kohen, he was a Levi, there was a Kohen, and a bunch of similar things that are Yuchsin issues. And there the Tanna Kama says it's a psul either way, and Rav Shimon doesn't argue. So you see, Rav Shimon Taka does agree that she doesn't want Yuchsin even if it is higher or better than what she expected. Says Gemara, that is not necessarily a proof, and I'll show you because in that next coming up Mishnah there's a monetary issue as well, and still it doesn't mention that Rav Shimon doesn't argue, and we're agreeing that Rav Shimon would argue that a monetary thing that's more than she expected she's okay with. Why doesn't he argue then there? Must be not because that's Yuchsin. The reason he doesn't argue there is because he already argued in our last Mishnah. He doesn't have to argue in the next Mishnah again. Where do you see monetary things there? So it says, if he promised her that he has a grown daughter or shifcha, or promised her he does not have one, and it was wrong either way, then the Tanna Kama over there says that that's a psul, and Rav Shimon doesn't argue. Okay, so there you see, obviously the reason he's not arguing is not because that's a monetary issue, and the reason that he's not arguing is because he already argued in the last Mishnah. So you don't have a proof from here that Rav Shimon agrees to Yuchsin. So the Gemara gives two responses to this. The first response is no. In monetary things, he already argued in the last Mishnah, so he doesn't have to argue on that again. So that's, as far as the shifcha and the bas to help serve her, that's a monetary issue. That makes sense that he doesn't argue again. But why didn't he argue on the Yuchsin? If he meant to argue on the Yuchsin just like he argued on the monetary issues, we wouldn't be able to figure that out on our own. We would need him to say so. And therefore, obviously, the fact that he doesn't say so proves that he doesn't argue. The Gemara's second response is that no, shifcha and bas that are grown, the word migudelas is what's used. It doesn't mean that she's grown to be able to serve. Migudelas means high ranking. And what she's meaning to say, this is also a yuchsin issue. She means the reason this is a problem is because she doesn't want a shifcha or a bas that's either too low ranking or too high ranking. She doesn't want a high ranking shifcha because high ranking shifcha is going to go socialize with the neighbors and tell the neighbors all the secrets in the house. She doesn't need that. And therefore, that is also a problem, and Rav Shimon agrees that that's a problem. It's not a monetary issue at all. This is all Yuchsin, and all Yuchsin issues, Rav Shimon agrees is a problem. Okay, the Gemara now moves on, and we go into a lengthy brisa which discusses how you define certain terms of him claiming what he is. If he claims that he knows he has certain skills or certain levels of learning, how do you define them to know whether he spoke the truth or not? So first, the Mishnah says if he says he's a karyana, meaning he knows how to lane. So the way we define that is if he laned 3 psukim in shul, then that's it. He counts as a karyana, and if that was the condition, then it's mekudeshes. Kiddushin is chal. Now Rav Yehuda disagrees. Rav Yehuda says he has to read and he has to be metargim. So that means that he makes up his own targum. So Gemara asks, the Rabbi Yehuda said in a different brisa, you can't make up your own targum. If you translate it exactly as the pasuk is written without what our misora of targum adds, so then you're a liar. And if you add on things to the targum we have, so then you're a mecharev umagadev, someone who's cursing and embarrassing. So the Gemara says no, targum means the real targum, the misora that we have from Unklis, from Har Sinai. Next, if he says he is a kara, he doesn't say he's a karyana, which is a bal klira. He says he's a kara, he's a reader. So then he has to be able to read Nevi'im, to read a Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim exactly without mistakes. If he says he's a shoyneh, which refers to Mishnah, so Chizki says he has to know halachas, and Rechon says he has to know Torah. The Gemara assumes that means Torah Shabiksav, Psukim. So the Gemara asks that that's not how we define the Mishnah. Rabbi Meir defined that as halachas. Okay, that matches what Chizki said, but Rabbi Yehuda defined that as medrash. No one says Torah. So no, when we say Torah, we mean medrash of Torah. We mean the midrashim on the Torah, meaning those halachas, the sefra and the sefri that are halachic midrashim on the psukim. Now, that's if he said he's a tanina. If he said he's a tana, then he has to know all halachas of sefra, sefri, and tosefta. If he says he's a talmid, so he doesn't have to be a talmid on the level of Shimon ben Azai and Shimon ben Zayma, who never married, and they were talmidim, and they learned b'shkida, they learned basmanda all their lives, and they knew everything everywhere. It doesn't have to be a talmid on that level. It just has to be someone you could ask him anything, anywhere, in what he learned, and he's able to answer even in Mesechas Kala. Now, if he says that he's a chacham, you don't have to be like the Chachmei Yavna or like Rabbi Akiva and his Chaverim. You can ask him any type of chachma, any type of logic, anything you could learn and figure out and understand in all topics. It doesn't have to be on that level. It has to be that you could ask him a Dvar Chachma, any type of Dvar Chachma, and he could say and answer that. Not on their level, but again, he has to know Chachma. Now, if he says that he's strong, he doesn't have to be as strong as Avner ben Ner and Yoav ben Tzuria. He just has to be strong enough that his acquaintances are afraid of his strength. If he says that he's rich, he doesn't have to be as rich as Rabbi Elazar ben Charsum and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, both mentioned in Chazal for their wealth. You just have to be strong enough that the people of his town respect him and they honor him because of the riches that he has. If he says that he's a tzaddik, so even if he was a rasha completely, she's mekadeshes anyway, at least misafik, because it's possible that he had a thought of tshuva, and here her tshuva makes him a rasha, makes him a tzaddik, makes a rasha into a tzaddik on the spot. If he says that he's a rasha, so then even if he's a tzaddik, she's mekadeshes, because maybe he had a thought of avodah zara, which makes him into a rasha on the spot. Now we have a famous Gemara which lists 10 measures of various different traits and where they ended up in the world. For each of these, it says 9 went to one place and 1 was divided up amongst the rest of the world. So the place that got the 9 has a heavy concentration of this thing. So what are these various measures of things and where did they go? So the first thing is that there are 10 kavim of chachma, wisdom, that went down to the world, 9 went to Eretz Yisrael, and 1 to the rest of the world. Then you had beauty, 9 went to Yerushalayim. Then you had wealth, 9 went to Rome. And then you had poverty, so 9 went to Vavel and 1 to the rest of the world. Next is arrogance, of which 9 went to Elam. On this, the Gemara argues. The Gemara quotes a vision from the Navi Zechariah, where Zechariah says he saw 2 women carrying an ephah, a measure, a container of some sort, and it was suspended between the sky and the earth. And Zechariah asked the Malach who was speaking with him, where are they going with that? And he said that contains evil, and they're building a house in Shinar, which is Vavel. And Rav Yechanan said that these 2 women represent chanufa and arrogance, flattery and arrogance, and that these 2 spirits came down to Bavel, and they were bringing this ephah to there. So you see that arrogance came to Bavel. So then the 10 measures, the 9 of them should have gone to Bavel, not to Elam. So the Gemara answers they came down to Bavel, but they didn't stay in Bavel. They moved on somewhere else. They moved on to Elam. And you see that because in the vision, it says that they're bringing to build her a house, That means only one of these women, one of these spiritual forces would have a house built in Bavel itself. The other one's going to move on somewhere, and that was referring to the gasas, the arrogance, which moved on to Elam. So Mara asks another kash on this, but gasas, arrogance, goes together with anias, with poverty, and we already said that poverty is concentrated in Vavel, so it should also have the concentration of arrogance. Someone says, no, that's not talking about financial poverty that goes together with arrogance. It's talking about poverty in Torah knowledge that goes together with arrogance. As we see, it says in the pasuk in Shir we have a little sister who is not fully developed yet, referring to the fact that the little sister, which is Elam, which is where Daniel was when he said the pasuk, so that has not developed in a Torah yet, and therefore Elam is poor in Torah, and that's why it has arrogance. How is it poor in Torah? Exactly, said Rav Yechanan, it was Zeiche, it merited to learn, but it did not merit to teach. Okay, back to the list of where various different traits are concentrated. So Gvura, strength, is focused in Persia. Kinim, that's lice, that is in Media. Witchcraft is in Mitzrayim, at least 9 out of 10. Plagues are by pigs, Negayim, by pigs, Chazirim. Znus, that is immorality, is in Arabia. Brazenness is in a place called Mishon, which is an island in Vavel. Speech is 9 out of 10 went to women. Drunkenness, 9 out of 10 went to the Kushim, and sleep, 9 out of 10 went to Avadim, slaves. And then the rest was divided up amongst the rest of the world. This concludes this Gemara. Now that takes us to our next Mishnah, which is the one mentioned earlier, which lists various types of yichus that a man could promise wrongly that would passel the Kiddushin. So the Mishnah lists, if he says he's a Kayin and it turns out he's a Levi, or if he says he's a Levi and he was a Kayin, or he says he's a Nisin and he was a Mamzer, or vice versa. Or if he says he lived in a Ir and it turns out he lived in a Krach, or vice versa, a small city versus a large city. The difference there is the big city is crowded and there's market and she may not like it. If he says, as we said, that he has a daughter or a shifcha who's grown or high ranking, depending on the pshat in the Gemara before, and he either has or he said he does not have, and he has. Or if he said that he has children and he does not have, or he said he does not and he has. In any of these things, even though she says, I agree to it anyway, that means he promised it. He was misrepresenting the truth. And she said afterwards, I didn't care. I'm willing to marry him anyway. Still, the Kiddushin's void. She could do another one if she wants, but the Kiddushin's void because it was under false pretenses as to what he represented.